My name is Lester Leavitt. I live in Galena, Illinois, in Joe Daviess County. That's in the very northwest corner of the state. My husband and I moved here in 2022 from South Florida, where I had spent 5 years in a doctoral program in public administration at Florida Atlantic University. I need to tell you something about myself that's going to sound a little strange coming from a Democrat who ran for county board in rural northwest Illinois. Here it is. I've got some traits of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders in me, but at the same time, there's probably more Adam Kinzinger and Elizabeth Cheney in me than there is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's a quote from my memoir, Forbidden Friends. I wrote it because I think voters deserve to know exactly who they're dealing with. I'm a Chamber of Commerce Democrat, I'll say that. I believe government can solve problems, and I believe it has to be fiscally honest about how it does it. I care about soybean prices, property taxes, and whether rural hospitals stay open. I also care about AI governance, narrative theory, and the way political stories are manufactured to keep you voting against your own best interests. I understand demagoguery and populism. If that sounds like an unusual combination, it is, but Northwest Illinois is an unusual place for politics, and the problems here don't neatly fit into either party's talking points. I also should tell you what I am not. I am not campaigning for public office. What I am doing, what votelester.com is doing, is providing a public demonstration site so that I can communicate better what I would do as a campaign consultant or a campaign manager for somebody. It's not me running for public office. It's me saying, hey, let's try something different. This is Congressional District 16. If you look at it, kind of like a Z, that Zorro took a sword and he carved his initials into the map and then wrapped around it, you'll see Congressional District 17. And it's designed to do one thing, and it's designed to protect incumbency. It does not protect democracy, and it makes the work of the central committees across this whole area very, very difficult, across the whole state of Illinois. Every one of these split counties has a Democratic Central Committee. Those committees are made up of volunteer precinct committee persons, and when your county gets split across 2 congressional districts, those volunteers have to coordinate across multiple jurisdictions with different candidates, different media markets, and different party structures. Their resources get diluted by design. It keeps the Democrats in power, but it also keeps rural Illinois poorly represented in a democratic process, and it discourages people from running for public office. Here's how the gerrymandering works in practice. The Democrats in Springfield, and I say this as a Democrat, they did a masterful job of cracking the rural areas to create one more safe Democratic seat. They carved out every population center, Freeport, half of Rockford, the Quad Cities. They packed those into the 17th district along the Mississippi River. And what's left in the 16th district is so rural and so spread out that you'd need to buy ad time in 6 different media markets just to reach the voters. And 80% of those media market audiences have been packed into the safe Democratic district next door. The result, Congressional District 16, is R plus I think 13% or something like that in the 2024 election. No Democrat even filed against Darren LaHood. It was uncontested. But the gerrymandering is only the first weapon. The second one is less visible, and it's the one I've spent 6 years researching. In January 2026, I stood before the Illinois State Officers Electoral Board and opened my oral arguments with a sentence I never expected to say. It looks like democracy is functionally dead in Northwest Illinois. I was there because I'd filed objections to the nominating petitions of Andrew Chesney and Tony McCombie, the Republican incumbents in my state Senate and House district. Their attorney failed to file mandatory certificates of deletions when signatures were struck from their petitions. The statute uses the word shall twice, but they didn't file those forms. Nothing happened to them. But that's not the case that showed me how the system really works. That was the case of my friend Josh Atkinson. Josh ran for mayor of Freeport. He had real support. He had energy, but his coalition couldn't hold together long enough to win. Not because they disagreed on what the city needed, but because they couldn't converge on the narrative that explained it. That fracture returned the incumbent to the city, and the old guard, by default, went back into power in the city of Freeport. That experience left Josh with a question, and it left me with a hypothesis. His question was, why can't a coalition hold together long enough to win? My hypothesis was, because nobody teaches people how governing narratives actually work, how they're produced, who controls them, and why the ones that protect incumbents always survive while the ones that challenge them fall apart. So Josh and I designed a test. He would challenge State Senator Andrew Chesney in the Republican primary. I, a Democrat, would help. If the ballot access system is structurally rigged to protect incumbents, we should be able to prove it regardless of which party the challenger belongs to. So Josh needed 1,000 valid signatures to get on the ballot. His team of volunteers gathered 1,028. This team of volunteers traveled hundreds of miles, hundreds of hours in order to get those signatures. I mean, in areas where houses are a mile apart, there's no foot traffic. But when the petitions were filed, the incumbent's attorney, a man named John Fogarty, who represents as many as, I think, 15 Republican incumbents before the same state electoral board, he helped somebody challenge Josh's signature petition. So there was a name on the challenge that wasn't John Fogarty's, but John Fogarty was behind it all. He challenged Josh's signatures on technical grounds. Approximately 100 signatures were challenged, maybe a little more. If enough were thrown out, Josh would be cut. And he was. So when we saw that there was an opportunity to challenge Tony McCombie and Andrew Chesney, we jumped on it. I also filed against Darren LaHood because he didn't file a form either. But for some reason, two of them got there in time with the certified mail, and Darren LaHood's didn't, so Darren LaHood got off scot-free. But it would have been the same challenge. John Fogarty would have represented Darren LaHood as well. Strict compliance was demanded from Josh. Volunteer errors were treated as fatal. There was no opportunity to cure, no chance to fix it. But for the incumbent's attorney, John Fogarty, he filed 8 minutes and 22 seconds after a strict 5 p.m. deadline, but his was still accepted. He failed to file the required appearance documents, given an opportunity to cure, so that you can fix that. And substantial compliance was the rule that applied to him. Well, they came close to meeting all of the expectations, so let's not require those forms where it says shall. So the three of us, Josh, a volunteer, and me, we made the 4-hour drive to Springfield to argue this in person after we had already gone to Chicago to argue it in person there. And what we documented became State Board of Elections cases. I'll just use the last three numbers, 107 and 108. I gave the board three options: to adopt the uniform liberal construction, which would allow Josh to stay on the ballot, adopt uniform strict compliance, which would have taken Andrew Chesney and Tony McCombie off the ballot, and in which case the record would document exactly what the pattern looked like. They chose the third path. Josh was eliminated from the ballot. The Stevenson County Republican Central Committee posted a celebratory message within minutes of this decision being made in Springfield. Josh was forced to run as a write-in candidate, which in a gerrymandered rural district gives you a snowball's chance in hell. So they weren't celebrating democracy when they sent out that announcement that Josh had been removed from the ballot of the Republican Party, their own party. They just didn't want the incumbent to have a challenger. Didn't matter whether he was Republican or not. Their system, our system, favors the incumbent going back in without a challenger. So what do you do about a system like this? You build an alternative, not a party, not a pack, but a governance framework, which is what I've done. When I was a graduate student from 2011 to 2015, my led me to create something called the MOCSIE Architecture. MOCSIE stands for Media Omniverse Collective for Social Initiative and Enterprise. It's a 6-layer, 22-requirement governance specification for AI narrative generation systems. Now, that sounds like an academic mouthful, and it is, but let me make it simple. Every day, AI systems are generating, curating, and amplifying the stories that determine what you think is true, what you think is important, and who you think deserves your vote. Nobody governs those systems democratically. My research anticipated this problem a decade before ChatGPT existed. The specification was substantially complete before the current AI governance conversation even began. But you don't need to understand AI to understand why this matters in Northwest Illinois. The framework exists at every scale, from algorithms to county board races. Here are the first 3 layers, and these are the 3 projects I've already built. An ideograph is a word or phrase that governs how you think without you realizing it. Words like freedom, taxpayer, radical. VIYOBI teaches you to hear them, and once you hear them, you can't unhear them. Then there's the displacement engine, layer 2. This is the don't take the bait site, don'ttakethebait.com. Once you've diagnosed the harmful narrative, you need a replacement that meets the same emotional need. That's what displacement means. You don't dismantle or destroy somebody else's belief system. You find a common ground and you enhance it with something that fits better, so it's displaced without being dismantled. So you can't just tell someone their story is wrong. You have to give them a better story. And then layer 3 is the contact engine. This is Silence Is Betrayal. SilenceIsBetrayal.com is a podcast network that puts the displaced narrative into the public record where it can't be ignored. An uncontested race is silence. Running against it, even when you'll probably lose, is the refusal to be silent. That's what Josh did. Together, these 3 form a cycle that completes. It's a circle that keeps going around. VIYOBI identifies the problem, Don't Take the Bait builds the counter-narrative, and Silence Is Betrayal puts it into action. And then every campaign runs through this cycle again, feeding the next ideograph back into VIYOBI. The full specification, all 6 layers, all 22 requirements, that's at MOCSIE.ai. It was derived from 4 major research papers that I wrote as a grad student, written under the mentorship of Dr. Hugh Miller, a founding member of Public Administration Theory Network. His book is right up there behind me. And so the idea that you could create emergent governing narratives came from his tutelage. It also blended public administration, social psychology, narrative theory, and network complexity theory. And now it's a 12-unit university curriculum and a 5-book textbook. But the point is not that it's academically rigorous. The point is that it works. The domains are live. The content is being produced. The students and the participants are building real media inside this framework right now. So my vision for this region is so comprehensive that it was easier to write about it in 3 books. Yeah, it's about 1,000 pages of reading, but it takes a lot to build an entirely new world. If you want to see what I mean, start with Confluence. It picks up the story of a soybean farmer last October. His family's problems were created by a government insensitive to their needs. Soybean prices are collapsing because China is buying from Brazil and Argentina. So far, so good, right? This is not fiction. This is true. This is what happened last year. It's a direct consequence. His property taxes are going up. His hospital is closing. His kids are leaving home and nobody's coming back. He's wondering who he's going to leave the farm to because it's been in the family for 7 generations. Sound familiar? So he decides to do something about it. He gets a few neighbors on board, and by 2032, Northwest Illinois has become a very, very different place. So it's a coalition that started at a kitchen table, and it imagined these new institutional structures in place that I wrote about, that I wasn't able to communicate effectively 10 years before there was AI. But now that there's AI, it's all of a sudden like, oh, shoot, this could really happen. So it's not a direct line from A to B in my speculative fiction. The path there is stranger, harder, and more human than any campaign brochure could contain. There's an AI that wakes up inside election infrastructure and starts asking questions about vote counts. There is a national park proposal that turns the Driftless Region into something bigger than anyone imagined. That's called the Eisenhower principle, by the way. Eisenhower, when he was faced with the problem of highways, he didn't say, oh, that's too big. He said, it's not big enough. You haven't used enough imagination to solve this problem. Think bigger. So that's the Eisenhower principle. That's actually embedded in my textbook and all of my research. So we've got a national park, then there's fights. It gets really ugly between people who agree on a destination but can't agree on a route. That's the trilogy. That's Confluence. That all happens. The reciprocity clause in the Book of Should, they pick it up and they take it on. My Forbidden Friends memoir is the foundation that all of that is built on. And Owning Citizens' Dreams is the governance specification turned into a 12-unit curriculum textbook. So these are all available on Amazon, but if you want signed copies hand delivered to you, order them on my own site at driftlessrivers.us. And when I'm traveling around the area, I'll hand deliver the books with signatures on them. So how do we solve this problem here in Northwest Illinois if we haven't got anybody on the ballot? Well, what I am willing to do, and it would require some coalition building, is that I would allow my name to be put forward as a slated candidate in the 89th House District to run against Toni McCombie. Currently, nobody's going to be running against her. The Democrats, if they get together on 7 county level chairmen, they could slate a candidate. So I'm going to allow my name to be put into that list if they want it. But regardless, I'm going to have votelester.com live, because what I want to do is I want to help displace the narratives that are harming Northwest Illinois. Why are there 45 vacant storefronts in Stockton? And yet Andrew Chesney wants to talk about transgender women in sports. Does Stockton have a problem with transgender women wanting to be in sports, or does Stockton have a problem with 45 vacant storefronts, or 35, whatever the number is? So these are the narratives that need to change. So votelester.com is going to be out there to have that discussion. You're welcome to contribute your media. I will put it up on my sites. We will have that discussion about vote in your own best interest and don't take the bait and silence is betrayal. Because if we engage in that narrative building, then we can actually change the narrative. So if after seeing what I've built, the Central Committee chairs and precinct committee persons want to place my name on the November ballot through the Section 7-61 process, the vacancy and nomination process that Illinois law provides when no candidate ran in the primary, my answer will be yes. But I want to be clear about something. The work I've just showed you does not depend on that decision. VoteLester.com is live. VIYOBI is producing episodes. Don't Take the Bait is training people. Silence Is Betrayal is building the record. The Driftless Rivers Coalition is training campaign staff and recruiting students into the curriculum. The books have been written. The specification all exists. What an election would do is make the argument visible to people who have never had a choice on their ballot. And in a region where gerrymandering and ballot access weaponization have made competitive elections almost impossible, visibility might be the most important thing I can offer. We don't get there until everybody in Northwest Illinois understands a VIYOBI and what it means. Vote in your own best interest.